Waking up, Petal 3. My poker spine. Right at the time I discovered yoga, I had also met soulmate number 2. I went back to work in the financial industry at Roslyn Savings Bank since my Series 7 and insurance licenses hadn't expired yet and money was an issue. There was a big pay difference between being a personal trainer, yoga teacher, and a financial consultant, and he got laid off. I'm selling my soul, but it's temporary, I told myself. Back into the dungeon I went, sacrificing my dreams for money. Shortly after I went back to work, my back gave out, or more like my back just decided one day it had enough. I woke up in the middle of the night in January of 2003 with searing, excruciating back pain. This pain was familiar as I felt something like it after an 8-hour aeroboxing certification a few years earlier. But that was from overuse. It was nothing compared to the pain I felt now. The problem was when I went back to work as a financial consultant, I stopped working out and exercising. For almost a year, I just sat at my desk and stopped taking care of my body. This was a huge wake-up call for me. I found out I had multiple herniated discs in my lower back and neck, amongst many other spinal issues, including arthritis and degenerative disc disease. On top of that, my chiropractor at the time said I had a poker spine. I asked him what that meant. He said I had the straightest spine he has ever seen, and that's not a good thing when we need the curves for protection from impact. After x-rays and MRIs, I actually found out my spine wasn't just straight. I had reverse curves in my cervical and lumbar spine. Ugh. The spinal doctor dropped a bomb on me when he said that I had the spine of a 70-year-old. Not the best way to deliver the news. I burst out in tears in his office. My physical health was everything to me. I was only 33. I would be doing something simple, like loading the dishwasher, and my back would go out into spasm, and I'd be crippled in agony. It was not just painful, but scary. I didn't know what would set it off. One doctor told me never to run again. Another one told me running would help my lower back by bringing blood flow to the discs. This contradictory information from 2 top spinal doctors in New York inspired me to take my healing into my own hands. This was the beginning of my education into prevention, health, and wellness, not just body, but mind and soul. I learned how to take care of myself. Neither extreme, intense exercise or sedentary lifestyle were healthy for the spinal injuries. I had to learn how to exercise for my body. I also learned that most of the time back pain is caused by repressed emotions and past resentments that we hold on to. In other words, emotional baggage. Injuries or illnesses are shouting, "Pay attention to me, wake up." I had my first direct experience with this concept of mind-emotion-body connection when I was practicing my yoga routine to stretch and strengthen my back. I went into pigeon pose, a hip opener, and burst into tears. I had no idea I even wanted to cry. It just came out of nowhere. Surprised, but feeling relief as I let the tears flow, I felt my body becoming lighter as I let go and just cried. The hips don't lie. I learned later in my metaphysical studies that the hips are where we hold emotional baggage. It made sense to me. This happened a few more times during my yoga practice in the beginning. The 2 poses that stand out vividly were shoulder stand and wheel pose, which are inversions and back bends. As I released out of the pose, I also released tears and sobs of stored negative energy. I was still in the infancy of my new education into wellness and holistic health, so I wasn't sure what was happening. But now I know that we hold our issues in our tissues. Our cells have memories that are released during healing practices such as yoga. Got emotional baggage? Practice yoga. This is one of the reasons that yoga is such an effective tool for healing. I knew that this health setback was supposed to happen. It forced me to slow down and take care of my health in a new way. I was now conscious of stress levels and how they immediately affected my body. I learned how to breathe and move in a way that was right for my body. Instead of panicking every time my back went out and being dependent on the doctor, I learned how to heal myself. I became my own doctor. You can heal yourself. As I started to wake up and heal my body, mind, and spirit, I used affirmations and mantras as I was practicing yoga. They came from my Bible, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. The premise behind this book is that pain is blocked energy, often caused by psychosomatic emotional imbalances in our thought patterns. The probable cause of the issues in the upper back was stemming from the lack of emotional support, feeling unloved, and or holding back love. No surprise there. The new thought pattern and affirmation is, I love and approve of myself. Life supports and loves me. The probable cause of lower back pain was fear of money, lack of financial support. The new thought pattern and affirmation, I trust the process of life. All I need is always taken care of. I am safe. At first, I didn't fully understand the power of these affirmations and beliefs, but saying them made me feel peaceful inside, so I thought, why not? I repeated them, whispered them, chanted them, sang them some days. I added them into my yoga stretching routine in the morning, and it seemed to help tremendously. A student once asked an enlightened spiritual yogi what the difference was between feeling good and God. He replied by holding up his hand, with his thumb and index finger touching, forming the number 0. If we don't feel well in our body, how can we feel well in our life? Nagging pain keeps us on edge and not fully present. It's hard to be happy when we are in physical pain. Healing our body is a priority on the spiritual path. I know many spiritual people who would just as well forget about their body since it's not who they are. However, our body is our temple. It is home to our soul. Ignoring our body is not a more enlightened way of being. We spend more time fixing our cars than fixing our body, remodeling our homes and taking care of our bodies. Those things are important, however, we can't ignore our human body and expect to live up to our potential. If you don't have your health, you can live in a castle with all the luxuries in the world, and it won't matter if you're sick and you can't move. Sitting was the most painful position for my back, so as a result, I worked part-time at the bank and then had to stop completely. My back pain was another sign that this career wasn't for me. I filed for partial disability, but thanks to the non-helpful insurance companies, they denied my claim. I had an attorney which cost me thousands of dollars, and they still deny me. Unfortunately, not being able to work, not having health insurance, and having to support my daughter by myself, I accrued high credit card debt and had to file for bankruptcy. This experience left me with a new shame, financial shame. Financial pain is real, and it feels awful. Effing angry. Before I left the financial industry altogether, however, another angel appeared in my life. An intriguing woman opened an account with me at the bank. When I asked her occupation, I was surprised when she replied, I'm an astrologer. I was always drawn to astrology, the science of the planets and stars, even though I didn't know much about it and never met anyone that did it as a full-time career. She asked me my date of birth, and from that one fact, she gleaned two things. Both my parents were born on cusps of signs, which they were, and that my daughter would be in a family with just one parent, which she was. How she knew that, I had no idea, but it prompted me to save her card in my wallet. Besides the physical pain and financial anxiety, I was having relationship challenges going from bad to worse. Soulmate number 2 had convinced our couples counselor that I had several mental disorders, including bipolar, and convinced my daughter I had anger issues, which I did, but was in denial. I would scream at him, I'm not angry, motherfucker, and storm into her bedroom and slam the door. You know it's a bad sign when your boyfriend buys you a punching bag for your birthday instead of a pretty necklace. The only real disorder I had was not healing myself. I was walking around wounded, filled with toxic emotions, angry with a fierce Italian temper. I love to blame my temper on the Italian in me. And in denial that anything was wrong with me. That was an explosive combination. I never physically abused my daughter, although I did break a wooden spoon on her butt once. I learned that from my mother, who used to beat my butt with the wooden spoon. This alarmed Diana's therapist, who warned me the next time she would have to call social services and report me. We went through a few scares where I thought I might lose my daughter to the state. You know it's bad when you are working out at the gym and recognize the guy next to you because he's a police officer that has been to your house. Sometimes what can be even more damaging than physical abuse, however, is the emotional and mental abuse. My lack of self-control of my words and anger bruised her emotionally. Yelling and screaming at my daughter was killing her spirit. Although I apologized to my daughter in person and in a letter years later, it took me many years to forgive myself for this. Angel Blanche. So one day, at my wit's end, I pulled Blanche the astrologer's card out of my wallet and called her. I asked her if she remembered me since it had been a year since she had come into the bank. She replied, "Of course," like she was waiting for me to call. I asked her what an astrologer reading was like. I'll never forget her reply. She said, "Honey, 1.5 hours with me is equivalent to 2 years in therapy." Sign me up, I was in. Blanche opened the reading with, "In all my life doing astrology charts, I never saw one like yours." My stomach dropped. Was that good or bad? She said I had a very unique chart and began to explain. For the hour and a half, I pretty much sat there with tears streaming down my face and my mouth agape. I learned so much about myself then. The only thing I didn't want to hear was when she told me not to marry soulmate number 2. I wasn't ready to hear that advice at the time, but she was right. Blanche was another catalyst for my healing, another angel God sent me. She told me I pretty much raised myself and I was sweeping all my feelings under the rug, to which I agreed, and that I wasn't dealing with my feelings appropriately. She said I like to wear blinders like horses wore. I also like to wear rose-colored glasses. She said my chart was like a seesaw. Everything was opposite each other and in extremes. I had to learn how to walk the middle way and find balance. She also told me I came into this life to experience compassion, and it was my destiny to lead and inspire large groups of people through public speaking, and emphasize not just large groups, but the masses. I said, "Impossible, I will never be a public speaker." She told me it was my destiny. "It's right here," she said. "It's in your chart." Then her countenance changed as she looked me in the eyes, leaned in and said, "I bet no one has ever told you how to be a good parent." I shook my head. Blanche said, "If you want to be a good parent, you have to be a happy camper." Well, that was news to me. I have to be happy. I only thought of my daughter's happiness. I never thought to think that my happiness was also important. Happy camperness. So began my search and my journey into my happy camperness. I became a happiness seeker of true joy. I continued on my yoga path and completed a 5-hour yoga teacher training. I studied, read, and went to every workshop I could on yoga, parenting, healing, and improving your relationships. I studied Buddhism, A Course in Miracles, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, quantum physics, The Secret, the Law of Attraction, Think and Grow Rich, Eastern medicine, wellness, nutrition, Reiki, Thai yoga massage, studied universal spiritual laws, did past life regression, hypnotism, drum circles, yoga retreats, meditation retreats. I chanted my heart out at kirtans. I trekked across the country to California multiple times for workshops and yoga trainings, even trekked across the globe to India, the motherland where yoga originated, to study and learn Ashtanga yoga with the beloved Patabi Joyce before his passing. Into the concrete jungle of Manhattan, I ventured to find inner peace and healing with Omega, a holistic institute, and various other well-known teachers. I completed a 40-week in-home spiritual St. Ignatius retreat, took workshops at Kripalu in Massachusetts, went to Florida for health and yoga retreats, and more. I was an open sponge, a spiritual seeker, committed to learning everything I needed to heal myself. Dear Blanche gave me an affirmation to repeat before bed and when I awoke in the morning that I saved to this day. I have absolute faith my higher self is supplying me with perfect health, happiness, and abundance. I had no idea what an affirmation was or what my higher self was back then, but I went with it. That's the thing about awakening on the spiritual path. Some things you get right away and some concepts take longer to seep in, depending on how many walls you have up. I had many which I thought were there to protect me. There was some truth to that. However, when we protect ourselves by closing our heart, we also close our heart to receiving and experiencing the good too. When we think love instead of feel love, our life becomes artificial and superficial and we become numb, which was how I lived my whole life. Angel Gantogden. Out of all the different philosophies, Buddhism resonated with me the most. As I started out on my yoga teacher trainings, which were mostly about the physical body through this particular organization, I simultaneously studied Buddhism, which is the science and study of the mind. I found the Deepankara Meditation Center through an online search one day looking for a church or a spiritual community that my daughter and I could join, besides Catholicism. While there are many beautiful aspects about religion, the only thing I walked away with from Catholicism was confusion and fear of burning in hell every time I cursed. And I had a potty mouth, so I was convinced I was going to hell. As an imaginative child, I sat in my room and actually contemplated, shaking in fear, what hell would be like, because that's where I was convinced I was going after dropping the F-bomb all day long. Somehow I knew deep down that this wasn't what religion was supposed to be about. So when a meditation center came up online, my curiosity arose. Kismet had it that day. I called for information. The resident monk in Togden, who later turned out to have a significant effect in my life, was teaching a special class that night on parenting. I really was not planning on going. I had to get a babysitter and had reservations, just like we all do when we try something new for the first time. But God had other plans for me. And the woman who answered the phone would not let me get off the phone. She said it was not his typical class and one he would probably not be teaching again. She was persistent that I attend this class. It was so uncanny that I made it happen. Angel intervention again. I got a babysitter and brought my journal and sat on the floor at the feet of this brilliant, funny, wise, compassionate man/Buddhist monk. I was in awe. Every molecule in my being was smiling. I knew I was in the right place at the right time. This was the first time I heard someone say that I could have inner peace. I didn't even know what inner peace was, but something deep inside of me knew I needed it, and needed it bad. Now I was in search of happiness and inner peace. They were like two long-lost friends finding their way back home. I knew that there was another reality out there, and I was determined to find it. What I finally came to realize after almost 15 years of searching was that the healing I was looking for and the peace and happiness I was in search of was right inside of me. All that you need is within was one of the first spiritual concepts introduced to me at a yoga class. Could it be that simple, I wondered? That statement resonated with me, but I couldn't quite figure out how to find it. The reason I didn't understand this truth was because there was so much blocking the way. Consequently, I learned that the spiritual journey is not so much about getting anything more, but about letting go and releasing all that is blocking your true light within. This wonderful metaphor from Debbie Ford's book, The 21-Day Consciousness Cleanse, describes this concept. In 1957, a monastery in Thailand was being relocated, and a group of monks was put in charge of moving a giant clay Buddha. In the midst of the move, one of the monks noticed a crack in its surface. Concerned about damaging the statue, the monks decided to wait a day before continuing with their task. One of the concerned monks came to further examine the giant statue. He shone his flashlight over the entire Buddha. When he reached the crack, he was astonished to see something reflected back at him. His curiosity arose. The monk got a hammer and a chisel and began chipping away at the clay Buddha. As he knocked off piece after piece of clay, the Buddha got brighter and brighter. After hours of work, the monk looked up in amazement to see standing before him a huge solid gold Buddha, a priceless treasure the likes of which never had been viewed before. Historians believe the Buddha had been covered by clay by Thai monks several hundred years earlier before an attack by the Burmese army. The monks had covered the Buddha to protect it so it wouldn't get stolen. In the attack, all the monks were killed, so it wasn't until this day that the real value of this great treasure was discovered. Like the Buddha's clay covering, our outer shell serves to protect us from the world, while our real treasure, our soul, our light, and our truth lies within to be uncovered and discovered. While mankind has the technology to send man into space, we are still working on discovering the universe within ourselves, our innate spiritual genius, our DNA, divine natural ability. Conquering inner space is what the yogis that have come before us have done. There are numerous yogis, saints, avatars, and enlightened beings, some well known and some not, that have walked the earth to teach and to remind us of all we once knew. Even we've had lifetimes where we knew who we were. That is why Socrates said, "Learning is remembering." We lived our lives with the knowing of our divinity. Now we are here to wake up and remember our divine nature once again.